When a retired federal agent moves into a quiet suburban neighborhood, a defiant blue mailbox sparks a war with the HOA's power-hungry president. But when her citizen police go too far, they awaken a force they never saw coming, and the suburbs will never be the same.
When I moved into Pinebrook Meadows, I honestly thought I'd found the perfect place to disappear. Quiet, tree-lined streets, freshly paved sidewalks, neighbors who mostly kept to themselves. Or so I thought. It was the kind of suburban backdrop that hid more secrets than the CIA's basement, which was ironic, considering my own line of work. To the rest of the world, I was Alex Rivers, freelance systems analyst, working remotely, harmless, mildly eccentric. I had a taste for vintage hardware, worked odd hours, and kept a dog named Tango, who was more intelligent than most humans I'd worked with. What no one knew, and what I fully intended to keep buried, was that I'd spent the last decade embedded in federal operations, most recently helping unravel a racketeering scheme that ran so deep into local politics it gave the Bureau indigestion. So, yeah, retirement, or at least temporary disappearance, sounded like heaven. I bought the house cash, a 2-story corner property with a wide front yard and enough distance from the HOA to keep things civil. Or so I thought. My first violation came on day 11. It arrived in the form of an aggressively worded letter folded with military precision and taped to my brand-new mailbox. That mailbox, by the way, was custom-made. Dark navy blue, steel-reinforced, modeled loosely after a World War II military call box. It even had a brass handle. I'd had it shipped in from a specialty shop in Ohio. It was sturdy, handsome, and apparently the most offensive thing to hit Pinebrook since someone once installed solar panels without board approval. The letter read like it had been written by a cartoon villain with a thesaurus. Violations included unauthorized postal aesthetic, nonconformity of visible structures, and my personal favorite, visual disruption of neighborhood harmony. I chuckled and tossed it into the recycling. Some HOA drone had clearly gone rogue. Didn't apply to me anyway. My property had been zoned independently. I wasn't part of the homeowners association. Legally, physically, spiritually, completely separate. 2 days later, I met her. Karen Langston, president of the HOA, and a walking monument to suburban fascism in yoga pants. She marched up my driveway like she was storming Normandy, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Tango barked once. She flinched. I smiled. "Can I help you?" I asked, casually checking the solar charger on my phone. Recording app was running. Good. "Mr. Rivers, I presume," she said, lips tight, eyes scanning my porch like she was preparing to issue fines for unpatriotic flower arrangements. "I'm here regarding your mailbox." "My mailbox?" I repeated, pretending I hadn't read her glorified ransom note. "It is in violation of community guidelines," she said. "We require standard black units, regulation height, no adornments or custom elements." I raised an eyebrow. "That sounds very compelling. Problem is, I'm not part of the HOA. My deed explicitly states I'm exempt. This property was never annexed. You can check with the county clerk." She narrowed her eyes. "That may be what your deed says, but the visual unity of this community is still under our purview. And as president of the HOA, which, again, I'm not a member of," her voice sharpened, "I've brought it to the attention of the Neighborhood Safety Committee." The what now? That's when I saw them. 2 men across the street in neon orange vests with the words Civic Enforcement Unit stenciled in bold black letters across the back. One had binoculars, the other held what looked like a notepad, or a citation booklet. I stared at them, then back at her. "You've deputized the neighborhood?" "They're volunteers, residents invested in keeping our streets safe, orderly, and compliant. They've documented 3 violations already. Your front hedge is 1.5 inches too tall, and your flagpole lacks the required HOA medallion." It took everything in me not to laugh. "You know that impersonating law enforcement is a felony, right?" She sniffed. "No one's impersonating anything. This is a community-led compliance initiative." I leaned against the porch railing, folding my arms. I bought this house to get away from bureaucrats with power complexes. I'm not giving that up for Karen and the lawn Gestapo. Her cheeks flushed. "You'll be hearing from us again, Mr. Rivers." I watched her march away like a disappointed stormtrooper, her 2 watchdogs trailing behind like obedient mutts. Tango sat beside me, tail thumping lazily. I muttered, "Well, that escalated fast." Back inside, I opened my laptop and pulled up the parcel boundaries, local ordinances, and zoning maps. I already knew I was legally in the clear, but I wanted backups, printed and ready. Something told me this was only the first shot fired. And just to be sure, I flipped the switch on the driveway's motion-activated security grid. I hadn't had to use my federal-grade setup in a while, but old habits die hard. If these people were playing pretend police, they'd better be ready for a very real legal beatdown. I had expected Karen to cool off after our little porch confrontation. Silly me. If there was one thing I should have learned from years of dealing with political tyrants in tailored suits, it's that the smallest taste of authority turns certain people into power-addicted lunatics. And Karen? She didn't just get a taste. She had turned it into a 3-course meal with dessert. The first escalation happened on a Saturday morning. I had just sat down in the backyard with a mug of coffee when I noticed the familiar neon vests heading my way. The 2 local vigilantes, flanking Karen like she was the Queen of England, and they were her rent-a-corgis. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She pushed open my gate like she owned the deed and strutted in. "Mr. Rivers," she snapped, "consider this a final warning." I took a slow sip of coffee. "For what? Breathing without a permit? You are intentionally ignoring official directives. You are creating a hostile environment through non-compliance. And now," she pointed a finger like it was loaded with bullets, "we have evidence." The shorter of her goons held up a phone, playing a video of me. Walking my dog. Literally, just walking. Tango was sniffing a fire hydrant. "Thrilling," I said. "Scorsese would be proud." "It proves," she declared triumphantly, "that you walk outside of designated pathways. That is a violation." "Designated pathways?" I blinked. "On my own lawn?" "This is a community," she said, with the kind of conviction that belongs in a padded cell. "Everything affects everyone." "Trust me, Karen. If that were true, you'd have been arrested for noise pollution 5 minutes into this sentence." Her jaw flexed. She signaled to her minions, and they stepped forward, pulling out what looked like shiny tin badges. "More dollar store than Department of Justice." "This is a citizens' enforcement action," one of them said. "We're placing you under community arrest." I nearly spit out my coffee. "Community arrest," I repeated slowly, as if translating from idiot to English. "Do you hear yourselves?" They didn't. They advanced like they expected me to surrender peacefully to whatever the hell this fantasy was. The short one reached for my wrist. Tango growled low, a warning he rarely wasted. I stood up, meeting the guy's eyes head-on. "Touch me," I said quietly, and I'll make sure your dentist identifies you by dental records alone." Something in my expression must have translated because they backed off half a step. At that moment, a police cruiser rolled by on its routine patrol. Good timing. The volunteers snapped into awkward attention, their bravery suddenly dissolving like sugar in hot water. Karen recovered quickly. "This isn't over," she hissed, then turned and stomped away, the goons scurrying behind her like nervous ducklings. Once I was alone again, I headed inside and pulled up my surveillance feeds. I'd installed high-resolution perimeter cams the moment Karen's nose started twitching in my direction. And, sure enough, they'd been lurking around all week, trying gates, measuring hedges, photographing my garbage bins. The kind of obsession serial killers dream about. I exported all the footage and sent a package to someone who'd appreciate the insanity. Max Bennett, former bureau tech specialist, current professional pain in my ass, and the only person I trusted with a keyboard more than myself. His response came within minutes. "Max, the hell did you move into? A cult for micromanaging lunatics?" Me. Feels like Stepford, if the robots were supervised by a tyrannical PTA mom. "Max, want me to dig into their finances?" I stared at the message for a moment, because honestly, I hadn't planned to get involved. I came here to lay low, let the world forget I existed. But this wasn't normal HOA behavior. I had seen cults with less emotional investment in conformity. And the worst part? Those fake badges. They weren't improvised. They had been manufactured, ordered, approved. Something coordinated was happening here. Me. Yeah. Pull everything. Charters, boards, bank records if you can get them. They think they're the law? Let's see who really is. His reply was instant. "Max, now we're talking. Better upgrade your security. Crazy people hate losing." I looked out my window, scanning the street, and there she was, Karen, standing at the corner, arms folded, staring at my house like she was already imagining a bulldozer flattening it to HOA-approved rubble. I gave her a friendly wave. She didn't wave back. Later that night, I installed a few more hidden sensors around the property. If Karen and her suburban stormtroopers wanted a war, they had no idea how badly they'd picked the wrong opponent. And as I armed the final camera, Tango sat beside me, staring out into the darkness, his ears perked. Something told me this was only the beginning. The night they took me started like any other. I'd just finished grilling a ribeye in the backyard and was halfway through a glass of bourbon when I let Tango out for his usual late walk. The air was thick with that pre-storm stillness, cicadas buzzing in the hedges, quiet save for the distant bark of a dog, and the occasional flicker of porch lights shutting down for the evening. I stepped onto the lawn barefoot, enjoying the grass between my toes, savoring the last few moments of peace. And then the lights went out. Not the house, not the street lamps, just the one floodlight above my garage, timed perfectly, too perfectly, to snuff out my visibility. A second later, I felt a sharp sting in my ribs. It wasn't pain at first, just pressure. Then electricity exploded through my side. I hit the ground hard, the glass shattering beside me. Before I could even register what was happening, two figures in black masks were on me. Gloves, zip ties. One of them yanked my hands behind my back, while the other jammed something over my head. Some kind of fabric hood, thick and chemically treated. Everything went muffled. My world shrank to heat, plastic, and adrenaline. I heard Tango barking, vicious, frantic. A loud ultrasonic squeal followed, and the barking stopped. Either he ran, or they hit him with a repeller. I couldn't tell. I couldn't see anything. My body twisted, flailed, but one of them had my legs. The other tightened the ties until my fingers went numb. They didn't speak, just grunted. I was dragged across my lawn like a sack of potatoes. I smelled fertilizer, dirt, oil. Then the metallic thunk of a van door sliding open, the groan of cheap shocks as they lifted me inside. Someone muttered, "Hurry up! She said 10 minutes max." The engine growled. The van jerked forward. My head bounced off the metal floor. They didn't know who I was. That was their first mistake. I couldn't move much, but my thumb flexed inside the watch band. Once, twice, 3 times. I felt the tiny vibration, the signal sent. Max would get it. It was only a matter of time now. Inside that hood, I started counting seconds, marking turns. Right, left, stop sign, gravel, railroad crossing. I pictured the route in my head, building a map with every jolt and sway. After what felt like 15 minutes, we stopped. More dragging, cement steps. A door creaked open, then the unmistakable scent of mildew and damp wood swallowed me whole. I was dumped onto what I assumed was a concrete floor. Hands left my body. A lock clicked behind me. Then silence. The hood came off maybe 5 minutes later. The room was a basement. No windows. Cinder-block walls painted a peeling beige. Old tools hung on a rack beside a rusty water heater. There was a folding chair in the corner, a drain in the center of the floor, and a single naked bulb hanging overhead, casting shadows like some B-movie interrogation set. Across from me stood Karen. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no faux friendly tone, just cold, triumphant stillness. She was wearing a dark sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back into a tight bun. She looked like a cult leader auditioning for a community theater production of The Handmaid's Tale. "Well," she said, like this was the start of a therapy session, "here we are." I didn't answer. "You've left us no choice, you understand," she continued, pacing slowly, her footsteps echoing in the small room. "You refused to comply. You mocked our efforts. You undermined the integrity of this community." I blinked at her. "You kidnapped me over a mailbox." Her face twitched. "It's not about the mailbox, Mr. Rivers. It's about order, safety, standards." "You tasered me and bagged my head for standards?" She crouched down, her eyes narrowing. "You're a threat. You came here pretending to be one of us, but you're not. You don't belong." Ah, there it was, the mask slipping. "What exactly is your endgame here, Karen?" I asked. "You planning to re-educate me? Break my spirit? Throw me in a HOA gulag until I paint the house beige?" She stood abruptly and walked to the door, rapping twice. A moment later, it opened, and one of the faux officers stepped in, holding a clipboard. "Assessment complete," he said nervously. "We, confirmed non-compliance with visual ordinances and, he didn't respond to informal enforcement." Karen nodded. "Good. Then we proceed." I turned my head slowly. "Proceed with what?" She smiled. "You'll be held here until the committee decides your fate." "Committee?" I repeated. "Is that what you call your LARP club?" Her smile vanished. "Careful, Mr. Rivers. You're not protected anymore." She left without another word. The door clicked behind her. I sat in that damp cell for what felt like hours. No food, no water, no light except that flickering bulb. They weren't professionals. That much was clear. But they had organization. They had delusions. And they had numbers. What they didn't know was that they also had a problem. Because I wasn't just some stubborn neighbor with a taste for vintage mailboxes, I was someone with training, with a network, and with very real, very well-connected friends who weren't going to let this stand. I flexed my wrists. Circulation was returning. The tiny mic embedded in the watch strap blinked once, recording. Every word, every threat. every plan they muttered on the other side of that thin basement wall. It was all evidence now. I didn't know exactly how long I'd been down there, but I knew one thing. The people upstairs were getting sloppy. Paranoia makes people talk. Fear makes them stupid. And both were brewing up nicely in that cozy suburban dungeon. Through the thin vent near the ceiling, I heard voices, muffled but distinct. Arguments, hesitation. One of them wanted out. Another said Karen had guarantees. One guy muttered something about not signing up for this kind of thing. Beautiful cracks in their fantasy. Meanwhile, the hidden mic on my watch had been recording everything, from Karen's community tribunal threats to the shaky confessions of her amateur henchmen, every word stored, every slip-up catalogued, and most importantly, Max had the signal. I didn't know how close he was, but I knew Max. I'd once seen him trace a signal through a black site firewall while eating a breakfast burrito and insulting the director of cybercrime in real time. He would come. And he would bring friends. Sure enough, just after my third round of breathing exercises and mental map building, I heard it. Distant at first. A low rumble. Then a quick succession of thuds. Not the boots of amateurs. These were professionals. Tactical. Methodical. Then the door upstairs crashed open with the violence of a thunderclap. Shouting. Male voices. Real ones. Federal cadence. "Down! Hands where I can see 'em!" A shriek. Karen. Definitely Karen. Heavy boots on the stairs. The basement door flew open, and light exploded into the room like a grenade of salvation. I flinched instinctively, vision swimming. A silhouette appeared in the glare. Kevlar vest, tactical helmet, familiar smirk. Max. "You always gotta make it dramatic," he said, kneeling beside me, slicing through the zip ties. "Jesus, Alex, you okay? Other than smelling like mildew and HOA tyranny?" Peachy. He handed me a bottle of water. Behind him, a team of agents moved through the basement with surgical precision, clearing corners, photographing evidence, tagging equipment. One guy stopped to photograph the fake badge one of Karen's goons had dropped near the steps. I stood slowly, legs shaky but functional. "Upstairs?" Max grinned. "Oh yeah, busted mid-rant. She was giving some lunatic speech about moral integrity while we read her Miranda rights. The irony was thicker than her perfume." He led me up. The living room looked like a Norman Rockwell painting vomited all over a bunker. Floral couch, dusty piano, bookshelf filled with HOA manuals and copies of The Art of Community Discipline. And, in the middle of it, Karen. She sat on a dining chair in plastic cuffs, flanked by two agents. Her face had gone from pasty beige to blotchy crimson, rage bubbling just beneath the surface. "You people don't understand," she barked. "This man is dangerous. He refused to follow the standards." One of the agents sighed. "Ma'am, you're being charged with kidnapping, impersonating law enforcement, conspiracy, unlawful restraint, and obstruction of justice. You might want to stop talking now." Karen turned to me. "You set us up. You tricked us." I stepped closer. "Karen, I warned you. I told you I wasn't part of your little suburban dictatorship. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you? You thought your HOA fantasy gave you actual power." "I do have power," she hissed. "I was elected." "Sure," I said. "And so was Napoleon. Didn't end well for him either." The other volunteers were being rounded up outside. The short one from before sobbing quietly on the curb, another trying to explain how he just thought it was neighborhood watch stuff. The agents weren't buying it. Max handed me a tablet. "You'll want to see this." Pulled the data from their phones before they lawyer up. I scrolled. Messaging threads, organizational docs, internal group chats labeled Pinebrook Purity Project. And worse, photos of residents, notes about who needed compliance visits, who had flagged gardens, unlicensed decorations, and even one file called Targets for Future Sanction. My name was highlighted. So was a single mom down the street, and a Vietnam vet whose flagpole they claimed was too tall. This wasn't just HOA overreach. It was a goddamn paramilitary fantasy. One document caught my eye, a scanned purchase order for custom badges, enforcement vests, and portable radios, billed to an HOA expense account. It had Karen's signature. Sloppy, elegant, incriminating. Got her, I muttered. We spent the next 2 hours processing the scene. I gave my statement to a DOJ officer while Max coordinated with local PD and the Bureau. Karen had been more than just an overzealous HOA president. She'd been running an unauthorized militia under the pretense of community safety. She'd falsified documentation, misused funds, and orchestrated my abduction under the guise of civic order. And it wasn't just her. As the agents dug deeper, more names surfaced: board members, volunteers. At least 2 council liaisons had been involved in funding their little patrol unit. The rabbit hole was going deep. By the time I made it back home, bruised, sore, but unbroken, the sun was starting to rise. Max followed behind me, holding Tango, who had been picked up by local animal control hiding behind the shed, unharmed but pissed. I stood in my doorway, looked out at my mailbox, still proudly defiant, still beautifully illegal, and let out a laugh I hadn't felt in weeks. Max yawned. Well, that escalated. I shook my head. Oh, Max, you have no idea. The courtroom was colder than it needed to be. Government buildings always had that sterile, impersonal chill, like they were intentionally trying to make you uncomfortable enough to plead guilty just to go home. This one wasn't any different. Polished floors, dull beige walls, uncomfortable benches filled with bored reporters and HOA members who'd shown up hoping to see a circus. They got one. Just not the kind they expected. Karen Langston sat at the defendant's table, her posture rigid, lips pressed into a line so tight you'd think it was holding back a scream. She looked different without her plastic authority. No badge, no clipboard, no sycophants in orange vests. Just a woman who'd mistaken control for righteousness and ended up shackled in her own delusion. The judge, a no-nonsense type, with sharp features and a voice like a gavel made flesh, called the session to order. The charges were read aloud, one by one, stacking like bricks in a prison wall. Kidnapping, impersonating a law enforcement officer, false imprisonment, conspiracy to commit a felony, unlawful surveillance, fraudulent use of HOA funds. And that was just the federal list. Local charges were coming down like confetti. Karen didn't flinch, not even when the term domestic extremism was mentioned. I'll give her this. When she went down with theatrical dignity. Then came my turn to testify. I took the stand wearing a dark gray suit, clean-shaven, composed, just another wronged citizen, ready to tell his story. The prosecutor guided me gently through the basics: my home, the mailbox, the growing harassment. Then she paused, glanced at the judge, and gave me the nod. I took a breath. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to clarify something for the record. Up until now, I've been referred to simply as Mr. Rivers, a private citizen. That is partially true. The courtroom leaned forward. My full name is Alexander Rivers. I'm a federal agent with the Department of Homeland Security, recently reassigned to inactive status after completing an investigation into regional corruption and misuse of civil infrastructure. A collective gasp swept the room like a dropped match in dry brush. Karen's head snapped toward me. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. I continued. The moment I realized that a civilian HOA was forming what amounted to an unauthorized private enforcement arm, equipped with uniforms, fake credentials, and even protocols, I activated my emergency surveillance protocol. Every conversation, every threat, every act of unlawful detainment was recorded and catalogued. The judge remained expressionless, but I saw her hands tighten slightly on the bench. The prosecutor's smile was surgical. Karen exploded. "He lied! He infiltrated us! This is entrapment!" The judge banged her gavel. "Ms. Langston, sit down and remain silent, or I will hold you in contempt." "I was protecting the community," she shrieked. "He was the invader." Another slam of the gavel. "I said sit. Down." Karen collapsed back into her chair, her energy drained. She was unraveling in real time, and the jury saw every thread come loose. The rest of the trial played out like a well-edited documentary. Evidence from Max's data sweep was displayed on large screens. The HOA group chats, surveillance plans, budget reallocations for citizen enforcement training, all under Karen's signature. Multiple witnesses came forward. Neighbors who'd been threatened, fined, surveilled, some in tears, others shaking with rage. One older gentleman, a Vietnam vet named Roy, spoke quietly into the mic. "They told me my American flag was too aggressive. They tried to fine me for flying it." By day 3, Karen's defense attorney was practically begging for a plea deal. But the prosecution had already smelled blood. The Department of Justice was involved now, and they wanted more than just Karen. They wanted the entire network exposed. That's when the civil suits began. I filed first. Unlawful imprisonment, psychological trauma, trespassing, attempted coercion, and more. I didn't just sue Karen, I sued the HOA as an entity, every board member involved, and the private security contractor they'd consulted without credentials. Others followed, nearly a dozen homeowners, including Roy and a single mother who'd been labeled a disruptive influence for having backyard parties with music after 9 p.m. The court froze HOA assets pending investigation. Their bank accounts, budgets, reserve funds, all locked. The association board was placed under third-party oversight until the end of the trial. Karen? She was denied bail. Too much of a flight risk. Too much of a public threat. The news coverage exploded. HOA president arrested in citizen police scandal. Ran next to federal agent breaks suburban militia ring. And my personal favorite, from mailbox to manhunt, the neighborhood that went too far. I watched it all from my living room, Tango curled up next to me, the TV muted. I didn't care about fame. I didn't care about being the face of HOA reform. I just wanted peace. But peace was gonna have to wait. Because justice? Justice had just gotten started. Fallout always comes in waves. First, the explosion, fast, violent, noisy. Then comes the silence, when everyone stands around pretending it's over. And finally, the aftershocks, slower, deeper, quieter, but much more destructive. After Karen's dramatic courtroom collapse, and the media circus that followed, I thought things might finally calm down. I was wrong. Her arrest had been the blast. What followed was a reckoning. In the days after the trial went public, whistleblowers came out of the woodwork. Former HOA board members, frightened volunteers, even one of Karen's supposed compliance officers, the one with the binoculars and the clipboard, reached out to investigators. One of them turned over a flash drive. Inside, meeting minutes, digital correspondence, even audio recordings of Karen laying out her plan for enforcement zones and targeted moral corrective visits. The phrases alone made the FBI visibly uncomfortable. Turns out, Karen's little operation had been a lot bigger than anyone thought. They'd been quietly expanding their influence to neighboring communities, trying to replicate their civil enforcement model. Her network stretched into 3 other HOAs, all with their own Karen-light presidents and 2-bit cronies wearing knockoff badges and harboring delusions of suburban control. So the feds cast a wider net. By the end of the second week, 5 more arrests had been made, 2 in Pine Brook Meadows, 3 in surrounding developments. Charges varied, but the themes were familiar: unlawful surveillance, impersonating officials, misappropriation of HOA funds, and, in one particularly dark case, breaking and entering under the guise of property inspections. The local news turned national. CNN ran a piece titled, "The Neighborhood That Tried to Become a State," while a late-night comedian described it as the Real Housewives of Homeland Security. I'll admit, that one made me laugh. But the damage was real. And not just to reputations. People who had lived under the HOA's thumb were furious. Meetings turned into protests. Board members resigned en masse. Civil suits stacked higher than the HOA's own bylaws. A class action emerged with over 40 residents filing jointly. And me? I just kept filing. Each day, another piece of paperwork, another deposition, another round of formalities and hearings and statements. Max helped when he could, even flew back out to testify before a federal oversight panel. This place was one bonsai tree away from turning into North Korea, he told them. They didn't laugh, but they nodded. Eventually, I got the call. It was a federal mediation officer informing me that the HOA's legal counsel had requested a settlement offer, one that would resolve all pending civil disputes in exchange for withdrawal of additional litigation. I didn't rush to answer. I reviewed the numbers with Max and my attorney. They were generous. Low 7 figures, enough to retire early again. Pay off the house. Replace the damn mailbox 100 times over if I wanted. But more importantly, it came with 2 critical terms: the complete dissolution of the existing HOA board and a permanent non-contact order from any former board member, officer, or volunteer enforcement unit participant. I took the deal. So did Roy, and the single mom with the music, and the couple who'd been fined for having non-compliant garden gnomes. By the end of the month, Pine Brook Meadows HOA was dead. The corporate entity was dissolved, funds reallocated to pay out lawsuits and fines, and the property management responsibilities handed over to a third-party neutral contractor with no power beyond trash pickup and sidewalk maintenance. Just the way God intended. Karen, meanwhile, awaited sentencing from a holding facility, where, according to my sources, she was already trying to organize a cell block behavioral committee. Old habits die hard, I guess. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy watching the House of Cards fall. But it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about precedent. About telling every clipboard tyrant out there that they don't get to invent laws just because they found a title and a podium. A week after the settlement was finalized, I stood on my lawn with Tango. He sniffed the grass while I admired my new mailbox. Same vintage steel, same military blue. But now it had a small addition, a custom plaque on the side that read, "Non-standard, non-compliant, untouchable." Across the street, the neighborhood looked quieter. Not dead, just free. Max called later that night. "So, what now?" he asked. "You gonna move again? Or stay and become mayor of Anti-Karenville?" I looked out at the stars, swirling silently above Pine Brook. "Nah," I said. "I think I'll stick around." Somebody's got to keep the peace. Some people think justice is a gavel hitting wood in a silent courtroom. Others imagine handcuffs, news headlines, or big wire transfers landing in personal accounts. All valid, sure. But for me, justice was a quiet Saturday morning, 2 weeks after the settlement, when I watched a truck haul away the old Pinebrook Meadows HOA sign, that overly polished slab of self-importance with its golden letters and aggressive topiary border. Gone, dismantled, reduced to parts, like the ego of the woman who installed it. I sipped my coffee from a mug that read "Problematic Neighbor" in bold letters, a gift from Max that had shown up in a box filled with sarcasm and sour candy. Tango lay at my feet in the sun, tail flicking occasionally at a fly. The birds were louder now. Or maybe it just felt that way without a Karen-breathing HOA bylaws down my neck. Life had gotten simple. That's not to say things were perfect. My name had made the rounds. There were memes, one with my face photoshopped onto a gladiator holding a mailbox like a shield. Another one showed Karen in a Napoleon outfit, being tased by a dog. Creative internet people. I learned to embrace it. But more importantly, I was left alone. I planted new trees, put up a hammock, rewired the entire security system just for fun. When the new community contractor showed up to talk about trash pickup schedules, he brought donuts and never mentioned property colors. I liked him immediately. Max flew out once for what he called a post-operation debriefing and beer marathon. He spent the whole weekend lounging on my porch, mocking my neighbors in whispered tones and trying to teach Tango to high-five. It almost worked. On Sunday, just before his flight, we were sitting out front, staring at my new mailbox, the third version, this time made from brushed steel with engraved panels showing silhouettes of eagles, just to piss off any surviving HOA traditionalists. "You know," Max said, "you've basically started a movement." I raised an eyebrow. "A movement?" "HOA Resistance League. I've already gotten 6 emails from other neighborhoods. They want advice, legal templates, a picture of your mailbox for inspiration." I groaned. "That's not a movement. That's a warning label." He grinned. "Could be worse. You could be writing a memoir." We laughed. But later, after he left, I sat down at my desk, stared at the blinking cursor on a blank document, and typed the first line. It all started with a mailbox. Because honestly, it had. That dumb, beautiful, non-compliant piece of steel had become the symbol of something bigger. Not just rebellion, not even just justice, but freedom. The kind you can't legislate with bylaws or threaten with fake badges. The kind that lives in silence, in peace, in the right to paint your damn front door purple if you feel like it. A few weeks later, I got an invite in the mail. Not from a government agency, not from a lawsuit, just a plain white envelope with a return address from a nearby neighborhood. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Handwritten, neat script, friendly tone. "Dear Mr. Rivers, we've just overthrown our HOA president. Thank you for the inspiration. We painted our mailboxes blue. Regards, your friends in Cedar Ridge." I pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like the Constitution. And then I took Tango for a walk. No leash, no path, just me, the dog, and the sunset. Because I could.